This is Shane Greer, co-owner and co-publisher of Campaigns and Elections, back for another video interview, this time sponsored by McShane LLC. And I'm here with Woodrow Johnston of McShane LLC to talk about all the craziness that's going on in campaigns at the moment. First question I got to start with, just because it's so topical. A big change from Facebook today. They're going to be allowing users to opt out of political advertising. What's your reaction to that, and how is it changing, if at all, your decision-making for clients?
Well, obviously this is an evolving issue. What I'll say is we'll see how many people actually take the time to opt out. Let's see how easy that is. I guess my first instinct is that there's going to probably be a shift to more display ads over the traditional digital display ads, more over the top, like on platforms like Hulu and all the different TV platforms people are using.
I think that's the interesting thing here, because it makes me think a little bit of ad blocking, right? Like, the facility is there for most users. Some browsers make it easier than others, but the reality is very few people do it. The other question here, of course, is to the extent that people do it, what kind of person is opting out? Is that person likely to be the kind of target for a political campaign? Is your approach at the moment kind of wait and see, watch how the stats play out? Is it affecting advertising and so on?
Well, I think it just kind of has a trend. Every time something happens like this, we build a better mousetrap. I mean, when we couldn't make, because of the TCPA Act, we can't make, calls to landlines over an auto dialer. And then there's ways around that. Now we're using peer-to-peer auto dialing. Where all you have to do is just manually put them into the list, and that's a unique call. So there's always going to be a way around it. I mean, I have an ad blocker on my web browser, and I remember it used to block YouTube videos, and for some reason it doesn't anymore. So as a result, we're just going to constantly find new ways around it, and we're just going to find a new way to reach them. And who knows if Facebook's even going to keep this policy. They seem to waffle on everything, on whether they want to censor, political stuff, or they go back and forth between that. So, we'll see.
And just on that, because that's the one thing I hear time and time again from consultants, is the biggest frustration with Facebook is it's like playing whack-a-mole with ad policy. You don't know what the next sudden announcement is going to be. Does that uncertainty affect in any way how you think about investing in the platform, where there is that just constant anything could change?
It does. I will say, and I'll be honest, their enforcement's somewhat selective. A consultant, our digital team's relationship with Facebook becomes much more important. Getting those approvals faster, getting everything you need out the door. I mean, the truth is, a lot of people think, oh, I can just do digital on my own. I'll just place the ad myself. But there's a huge advantage to hiring an ad agency like mine and getting those ads placed, because they have those pre-existing relationships.
Yeah. You touched on kind of P2P phones. Let's talk about P2P text, which is really exploded this year. Not surprising. We expected it to grow anyway, but I think the effects of COVID and lockdown have just really rendered it all the more important. How are you deploying that at the moment? How is that evolving this cycle?
Well, we've seen a pretty dramatic uptick in requests for peer-to-peer texting. I don't know if your audience wants us to explain that, but basically it allows us to, again, get around another loophole. You can't send a mass text message to people by just pushing a button. It has to be an individual action. So and probably eventually that's going to be outlawed, and then we're going to find another way around that. It's just, and that's just kind of, unless someone who does this all the time, we're always going to find new ways around it.
What do you see as best practice? So for campaigns that are considering deploying P2P or are deploying P2P and want to do it better, what's your kind of best practice tips for engaging with folks on that kind of platform?
So I would say, take advantage of merge tags. I like saying, first name, having the first name, where you actually, a lot of people just don't even take advantage of the merge tag. So when they upload their list, address the person by name. If you're trying to do voter identification, you can, and it's someone who's going to vote for you, and they say, yeah, great, we love you. You know that that's the person that's going to vote for you. Or they say, hey, this isn't my number, and hey, you can you can make change, make your data more effective from there. So it's a lot of, there's things like that. I find a common mistake I see is they make these peer-to-peer text messages sound too much like a mass text message. Make it sound like it's a personal text message coming from somebody. I like to say, hey, this is whatever surrogate you have for your campaign. Hey, this is the candidate. Make them see, and we have we have the technology and resources where we create a portal for the candidate, and anyone who replies to those texts can have a very nice, convenient portal for the candidate themselves to reply to those text messages. Mm-hmm. And you can even have it in a way where only the text messages that you want your candidate to see, not the, screw off, F you, take me off the list. You can have that filtered out by staff or your vendor, and then have the ones that you actually want responded to by your candidate to respond to those.
A final question is just the cycle itself, and not what anyone expected. It's affected almost every aspect of campaigning, not the least of which is fundraising and how folks are able to actually engage with voters. How have you seen this cycle play out for candidates that you're working with? How is it changing kind of resource allocation decisions, and how has that evolved over the course of the cycle so far?
So, I mean, in the current climate, door to door became less of a thing. I think we're kind of slowly seeing that come back, depending on which region of the country you're in. More people are making phone calls, mail's become more important. Digital and peer-to-peer has been probably the most important. I remember when peer-to-peer first rolled out, it wasn't really sold as much it was more sold as a let's get out our name out there, or let's try to boost turnout to an event, not necessarily used as a voter ID method. Now it's definitely used for that. It's another thing that we use in addition to our phone calls and going door to door. And since it's one of the cheapest ways, and I would argue a lot more effective than a robocall. It's probably until they make it illegal, we're going to keep doing it.
And final kind of thing, as we get what we're 4 months now from Election Day, there have been concerns about fundraising down ballot, but as that day looms and it gets closer and closer, one expects that we're going to see purses open up and folks start to get more in and spend more down ballot. Do you agree with that? Do you see us seeing a much more activity toward the end of the campaign than we might expect, just because there's been this bottleneck to date as a result of the slowdown resulting from COVID?
So you're saying you believe that there might be more timidness? Is that what you said?
More activity as we get later in the cycle, just because folks have had to be, to some degree, especially down ballot, dormant for a period because there was a lack of resource and a lack of ways to engage in activity.
I think you're absolutely right. There probably will be some bottleneck. I think there's a bottleneck in just about every aspect of our society. I mean, I remember they just opened up Las Vegas, where we're based out of. I was at a bar on a Tuesday night, and the place was packed, and people couldn't wait to get out there. So on the same token, I think that will translate to once we can, fully across the board knock on doors, make phone calls, we're going to be able to get a lot more volunteers out there. And hopefully, if we see a dramatic bounce back in the economy, people are going to be able to fundraise to the level that they used to before. I mean, I think even Joe Biden had one of the best quarters he's had. Yeah. And so it's yes, I do see kind of a V-shaped recovery in hopefully the economy as well, but also in every aspect of the campaign.
Well, listen, Woodrow Johnston of McShane LLC, thanks for chatting, and thanks to McShane LLC for sponsoring this video.
Thanks for having me.